Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udiraye. Today we'll be reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 62, starting at text number 11. Is it written? Sa tatratam apashyanti Kwasi kanteti vadani Sakinam madhya utastau Vivala vridita brasham Sa tatra tam upashyanti Kwasi kanteti vadini Sakinam madhya utastau Vivala vridita brasham. Dozo. Satatra tam apashyanti Sikanteti vadini Sakina madhya utastau Vivala vridita brasham. Satatra tam apashyanti Kwasi kanteti vadini Sakina madhya utastau Vivala Vaishnavis Satatra tam upashyanti Kwasi kanteti vadini Sakina madhya utastau Vivala vrisham. Satatra tam upashyanti Kwasi kanteti vadini Sakina madhya utastau Vivala Sa. She. Tatra. There in her dream. Tam. Him. Apashyanti. Not seeing. Kwa. Where. Asi. Are you. Kanta. My lover. Iti. Thus. Vadani. Speaking. Sakinam. Of her girlfriends. Madhye. In the midst. Utastau. Arose. Vivala. Disturbed. Vridita. Embarrassed. Brasham. Greatly. Translation. Losing sight of him in her dreams, Usha suddenly sat up in the midst of her girlfriends, crying out, "Where are you, my lover?" She was greatly disturbed and embarrassed. Purport by the servants of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Coming to her senses and remembering that she was surrounded by her girlfriends, Usha was naturally very embarrassed to have cried out in that way. At the same time, she was disturbed by attachment to the beloved man who had appeared in her dream. Om Agyan Timarandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Nena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadahmayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Utthapana Kamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sadvatutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vansha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasari Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Om. It's a great honor to be here in this mighty community of stalwart devotees, preachers, book distributors, organizers, stalwarts of all kinds. And we thank you very much for your hospitality. It's a very touching experience to come here and be with all of you. Hare Krishna. Here we've come to the 11th verse of this chapter, which is about a third of the way through. It's a short chapter, 32 verses. And it's a story. One of the stories in the Bhagavatam that one may read superficially and think, what is this? It's a love affair between Usha and Aniruddha. And this love affair, which I'll go into the details of in a moment, causes a family rift. Has anyone here ever heard of a marriage or boy and girl coming together causing a family rift? No? Never happens? In India, it never happens. Sometimes. All the time. Practically all the time. Even somebody's going to be legally married and somebody in one party says, what? No, not that person. And sometimes families stop talking to one another. I've seen a lot of it. And here we have a family rift because we have Usha, who is the daughter of none other than Banasura, who is actually a descendant of Prahlad Maharaj, and the demoniac family. So in the story, we find that Usha, who's living in a woman's ashram, albeit an opulent one, because Banasura was very wealthy, and in her dreams, she saw a beautiful young man coming to her, swarthy and perfect in all his limbs, and she fell in love with him. And in her dreams, she was being carried away by this charming personality, a loving affair in her dreams. And she would awaken at night, or at least as mentioned in this story, she awoken one night and called out, "Oh, my love, where are you?" waking up from the dream. And of course, in an ashram, as anyone who's lived in an ashram knows, everyone hears what everyone else is saying and doing. And one of the residents of the ashram, a friend of Usha's, Chitralekha, which means one who's expert at painting and drawing, overheard her exclamation and said, "What's going on? Why are you making such exclamations in the middle of the night?" sounds like a loving affair is going on in your dreams. And Usha admitted, yes, there's a beautiful man, young man, who's coming to me again and again in my dreams, and I can't live without him. I have to know where he is and who he is. And Chitralekha, who was an empowered personality, she had some mystic potency. She was eager to help her friend find out who this mysterious, beautiful personality was. So, using her talent in art, she had many talents to Chitralekha, she began to draw pictures to try to identify, much like in FBI or police work. When they're trying to find a suspect, they'll ask the eyewitness, did he look like this? Did he look like that? No. And Chitralekha was drawing pictures of Gandharvas because they're the most beautiful in the universe. Perfect limbs, perfect complexions, and so forth. But Usha, no. And going through thousands of renditions of various personages, she finally drew a picture of Aniruddha, who is the grandson of Krishna, the son of Pradyumna. And as she drew the picture, it was noticeable that Usha began to blush and become shy. And Chitralekha, aha, this is the person, right? Yes. So she said, that's Krishna's grandson. I'm going to bring him to you. Well, how would she do that? Chitralekha, as I mentioned, had many talents, and one of them was that she had mystic powers. So she transported herself to Dwarka. Only one problem, not everyone can enter Dwarka. It's Krishna's Dham. So there she was met by Narada Muni, who gave her some special knowledge of how to enter impenetrable cities, or at least Dwarka. And armed with the special mystic incantations that Narada had given her, she entered within Dwarka, she found Aniruddha, and she again transported him, not again, but she transported him then back to the home of Banasura. Not the home of Banasura per se, but she brought him right into the women's ashram. And of course, there he remained hidden. And Usha and Aniruddha lived together within the ashram clandestinely. Secret affair going on. Now, of course, secret affairs always come out. This is the experience of the world. Every drama, when there's something secret, it comes out at some point. Someone says, aha, something's going on. And that's what happened. That many of the women in the ashram, of course, they were all afraid of what Banasura might say if they didn't tell what they knew. What's more, many of the women guards that lived there and helped to oversee the ashram started noticing that Usha looked different. As the text says, some signs of conjugal contact there within the ashram going on. So one of them went to Banasura, who was no slouch. He had, how many arms? 1,000 arms, that's a lot. And he was so mighty, given a benediction by Lord Shiva, that he could smash anyone. He wanted unlimited strength. And of course, he was a bit disappointed because after he got all the strength through mystic power, he couldn't find anyone to fight with. So Lord Shiva had told him that in the future you'll find your match. Lord Shiva was slightly annoyed with him that now he got all this power and said, I want to fight somebody. Can't find anybody to fight. He would pound on mountains, break them to pieces with his arms. Shiva said, you'll meet your match. And of course, we know in the next chapter comes a great war that develops because of this love affair. And Lord Shiva, who is the patron and benedictor of Banasura, then takes the side of his ward, Banasura, and then there's a fight between Vishnujwar and Shivajwar. takes place, a huge war, when Banasura fights ultimately with Krishna. Krishna cuts off all of his arms, except he leaves a few, because after all, he is a descendant of Prahlad Maharaj, as mentioned in the Brihat Bhagavatamrita. Anyone in the family of Prahlad is beloved to the Lord. Understanding that something was going on in the ashram, Banasura, with some soldiers, overheated, came marching into the quarters of his beloved daughter Usha, only to find a handsome young man lounging in her room. And with this, he became extremely angry, but Aniruddha, the great warrior, stood up to fight the soldiers of Banasura and then Banasura himself. Of course, Banasura captured him, and there was a demand that he be given back. And this brought on the great fight we find in the next chapter. So these stories we hear of loving affairs between Aniruddha and Usha, and of course we can recall other stories that are as equally convoluted, plot twists, and something we might see in a drama in modern day television or movies. I don't know about Bollywood because I've never seen a film, only some dancing. But all stories back from Shakespeare and before and to the modern age are the same. The plot thickens when boy meets girl, and then everything starts getting complicated, as is mentioned by Lord Rishabhadev. Pumsastriya maituni bhavamitam toyo mitu hridaya grantamahu ato griya kshetra sutapta vitar janasya moho yamatam hammameti. That this unstoppable attraction between male and female in this world is going on everywhere. You can even see it, says Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur in his purports to the Brahma Samhita. Even within inanimate objects, you find yin and yang, this dichotomy here in the material world. So, why in the Bhagavatam? We may meet people and show them the Bhagavatam. This is a book on self-realization. And then they can open up to the 62nd chapter to investigate, what is this book on self-realization? And they find a loving affair between Usha and Aniruddha, and a huge fight and a war. Books on inner peace. And then a huge war takes place. A fight over who's going to marry whom. So what is that? And I brought up also other stories. One that intrigues me that's, as I said, equally convoluted is the Shamantaka jewel story. Krishna, defamed, accused, goes out to discover, find forensic evidence, entering in a cave, going to find the jewel, and so forth. That's another topic. But it's, to me, in a similar category. These stories with their twists, their turns, and so forth. And what to speak of in this story especially, it can be read, this story, a love affair between Usha and Aniruddha in a brahmachari ashram, or a brahmacharini ashram for that matter. So why? Because the Srimad Bhagavatam is the means by which we transfer our attention from the material to the spiritual. Of course, we know that we can't live without variety and personality. Yene ravindaksha vamuktamaninas toyastabhava vashudha buddhaya aruya krishnena parampadam tata patantya to nadrita yushmarankaraya. Indicative of the fact that, as this verse says, demigods praying to Lord Krishna within the womb, unless one develops a personal relationship with Krishna, the lotus-eyed one, and comes to a relationship with him, then whatever kind of imagined liberation one achieves here in the material world, one may get some position of power, or one may merge into the impersonal Brahman to escape the material world and the variety of the material world. Aruya Krishna, it's hard work also to get liberation in this world. Try to get crores of rupees and then retire and then say, now I'm liberated. Not so fast. No one can be liberated in this world. Patantyada, they'll fall back down again unless they have a tight relationship with Krishna. So the ways of doing this mean that we have to enter within the pastimes of the spiritual world. There are obstacles we face in doing that, as Krishna mentions in the Bhagavad-gita. Vita raga bhaya krodha manmaya mamupashrita bahavo jnana tapasa. This is participatory. You got to do the last lines. Okay, I'll do it again. Vita raga bhaya krodha manmaya mamupashrita bahavo jnana tapasa putamad bhavam agata. Krishna is saying that there's three main obstacles to our spiritual progress, and you have to overcome them. First one is raga. Raga means attachment for the temporary. The sages who see properly say, nasato vidite bhavo nabhavo vidite sata ubayora pitushton tas tvanayos tattvadarshipī. Those who are seers of the truth, Krishna says, they understand the difference between the material world and the spiritual world. One's temporary, the other one's permanent. If you get absorbed in thinking of the material world, Krishna says, yehi samsparshacha bhoga dukkhayo naya evate adyantavanta konteya. You got to hit it a little harder next time. That is, those who give their attention to the love affairs of the material world, the stories of the material world, that's what everyone wants. They want to hear some story of love. From Shakespeare to the modern age, music, poetry, it all has some hint of the adiras, or the relationship, the original relationship in the spiritual world between Radha and Krishna. But in this world, it becomes Lada Trapatraya. It means that Lada Tapatraya means that what is pleasure-giving in the spiritual world, what is joyful, eternal, in the spiritual world gets translated from Ladini, Samvit, and Santini. When that comes through the filter of the changing from material world from the spiritual world to the material world, we find that it becomes the three modes of material nature, which are Sattva, Rajas, Tamas. And then the living being, although interacting with the variety, the apparent variety, not apparent, there is variety, but in a sense it's apparent because it's the same thing mixed together, recycled over and over again. It's a reflection of the spiritual world. It has no real substance. Nasato vidite bhavo, nabhavo vidite sata. The material world's bhava. It's always changing from one thing to the next. Never stable and never satisfying. Sounds like an advertisement for a candy bar that'll never sell. Never satisfying. Get one today. So how does one come away from the attractiveness of the material world? Krishna mentions in the Gita, Urdva mulamada shakam ashvatam prahuraviyam chandansi yasya paranani yastam veda saveda vit. Adashchordvam prashitatasya saka guna pravida vishaya pravala adashchamulan anusantatani karman bandini manusha loke. That this material world is a reflection of the spiritual world. So the Bhagavatam gives us all of the attractive stories, but they're not of this world. Obviously, Janma Karma Chame Divyam Evam Yo Viti Tattvata. If you hear them and you understand the difference between the two, Nasato Vitite Bhavo, then Bhagavatam says this is the path to liberation. We can't give up the attraction of this world. We can't give up the stories about men and women attracted to one another in the material world, because it's originally coming from the spiritual world and we're inextricably attracted to it. And therefore, trying to renounce it or give it up is impossible. Soul has to have it. They have to have something. And without that, although one may sit in meditation for many years, close one's eyes and chant Om and remain detached from everything, even Vishvamrita, after how many years? 60,000 only. Then immediately, although he never saw Menaka, he heard her ankle bells and it's like, okay, I gotta go. And this is the nature of the soul. Wants to have some bliss. When I try to extract the bliss from the material world, I get just the opposite. Lada tapatraya. And if I try to embrace the material world, raga, it means then I end up like everybody else, smashed by the wheel of time. Nishpidyamanam upakarsha vibho prapanam. Prahlad Maharaj says to Lord Nrsingadev, everyone's afraid of you. Even the elephants are running away in fear. All the demigods are afraid. He said, I'm not afraid of you, my Lord. What I'm afraid of is your Vishnu Maya. And he said, it's like a big wheel. If you put one little finger in, next thing your hand's in, next thing your arm, next thing you're pulled in, and nishpidyaman upakarsha vipo prapanam, next thing I'm ground up again in the material world. That's what you get with raga. So what's the solution? You can't renounce it. You can't embrace it. Bhagavatam gives the solution. Yat pada punkacha palasa vilasa bhakta karmashrayam gratitam udgratayanti santa tadvanna rikta matayo tan rikta matayo yatayo piruda shroto ganas tamaranam vashabasudevam. The Kumaras describe how unless you hear the stories of the Bhagavatam and by their contact become attracted to the spiritual world, the adiras, the love affairs, the intrigue, the details, the beauty of the spiritual world, then you're rikta matayo, which means your mind is empty. And when your mind is empty, then shroto ganas tamaranam bhajavasudevam. There's a way in which the waves of material nature eventually will come and sweep you away. You may be situated in so-called liberation, but at some time, the modes of nature will grab you and pull you away. But not those who become absorbed in Bhagavatam. So the Bhagavatam gives every category and scenario of human interaction, and it allows us, by hearing it, to overcome the psychological conditions that keep us attracted to the material world. And the first one, as I just mentioned, is raga. And what's the next one? Bhaya, a fear of a personal existence, because I've suffered for so long in the material world. When I hear of the personality of God and I hear that I'm a person, actually these stories like Usha, Aniruddha, and so forth become repulsive to one who's attracted to the material world. That's why people who don't have a taste for Bhagavatam, if you read it, they'll fall asleep. Or they'll just say, oh, these are stories. I met a Gujarati couple when I was going door to door, distributing sets of Bhagavatams. And the woman of the house, she said, these are just stories. And she didn't want them in her house. She thought it was something like fairy tales. What could it do for me? So this sense that I have my material personality and it's a cause of suffering, therefore anything I hear from the spiritual world or about the spiritual world, this leads to krodha or anger or repulsion from the spiritual world. So, as a conclusion, so we can have some questions and answers to this part, this idea that I'm mentioning, is that when we become absorbed in the details of Krishna's pastimes, of course, Prabhupada again and again quoted the paragraph starting with Shushushosharadhanasya, then Shrinvatam Swakata Krishna, and then Nashta Prayeshu Bhadreshu, and Tada Rajastamo Bhava, and then Bidite Hriya Grantish Chijante Sarvasamshaya Shiyante Chasya Karmani Drishta Eva Manishvare. That there's this progressive way in which when you regularly hear the Bhagavatam, then the Bidite Hriya Grantish, the attachment to the material stories, the material love affairs, that becomes cut. And it doesn't leave us with nothing. We actually enter into the real love affairs of the spiritual world. And of course, the famous verse in the Bhagavatam, Vrikriti tam vrajava durbiraham cha Vishnu, shadhanvito nashunuyad atavarna yedya. Bhaktim param bhagavate pratilabhyakamam hridrogam ashvapahinotya charena dhira. Means that if someone with the right faith, shadhanvito, can hear in the context of understanding the philosophy of Krishna consciousness from Bhagavad-gita, and then in the association of pure devotees can hear the Srimad Bhagavatam, and especially the loving affairs between Krishna and his devotees in Vrindavan, especially the gopis. It's a very high-minded thing. Then Hrid Rogam Ashvapahinot Yacharena Dhira is a very quickly, says Shukadev Goswami, one can give up the dread disease of the heart, the attraction to the material world. That becomes replaced. It's replacement therapy. It becomes replaced with the real thing. And one can then give up the lust within one's heart that is mentioned by Krishna in the 3rd chapter of the Bhagavad-gita as the dread disease of the living entity here in this material world. Those are opening remarks. And now let's see if you have some reflections or questions to expand the conversation. And they have to be really good. If you give a bad question, we'll give you 100 rupees. Yes.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare. This is this thing considered the first live-in relationship?
Is what?
Is it like a live-in relationship?
Live-in? What's that?
Aniruddha and Usha,
Yes.
they were living together. Is it like a live-in relationship or?
That's what you call in India a live-in relationship? Yes. Yes, what's so remarkable about, as mentioned in the Sri Upanishad, Shapare Chukram Akayam Avranam Asnaviram Shudam Apapavidam Kavir Manishi Paribu Swayamburi Atatyat Yatortan Viradashas Patibhya Samabhyaha. That anything to do with Krishna is prophylactic. It's purifying. So if you hear about a live-in relationship, and Aniruddha, by the way, is Vishnu Tattva. He's Vishnu Tattva. So when we're hearing about this relationship between Aniruddha and Usha, you're hearing about one of Krishna's expansions. And the course of hearing this, which everyone's going to hear about anyway. If you go through the Delhi or Bombay airport, it's all sensual pictures everywhere to attract here. Come smoke a cigarette or drink this or that. And we're surrounded by it in the material world. So unless we have a portal to enter into this kind of relationship that everyone wants to hear about, naturally because of this sense of attachment, this lust within the heart, if you hear the transcendental live-in relationship, remarkably, your lust becomes diminished. And gradually it is vidyate hridaya grantish, the knot from my heart to the material world, the desire to hear about material relationships, it becomes cut. So yes, it is. And as we know very well, so is the Parakiya Ras in Vrindavan. And this is what many of the first Britishers who came to India tried to discredit the Bhagavat culture by saying, what is this? You read the Bhagavatam, it's a love affair, illicit love affairs going on here. What kind of religion is this? Well, Dharma projita kaitavo trapadamo nirmatsaranam satam. And in the beginning of the Bhagavatam, sadyo hridyara vrujyate takritibi shushushtabish takshanat. It says, mention that if you hear about this love affair, the story of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the love affair between Krishna and his various devotees, he said, then Krishna becomes trapped in your heart. He can't leave. He's tied up by ropes of love in the heart of the devotee. That's how powerful Bhagavatam is. Thank you for the clarifying question. No 100 rupees for you. Okay.
I have one comment.
Your comment, please.
In Chaitanya Bhagavat, there is an elaborate description of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's marriage with Vishnu Priya, sponsored by Buddhimant Khan, I think, Subuddhi Roy. And also, there is elaborate description of marriage between Sita and Ram. So the benediction is given that those who hear these pastimes of marriage, they don't have to marry again.
That's perfect, Prabhu. Perfect. Perfect application. Thank you. We'll add that to our repertoire. I love it. Bravo.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji. This class was full of wisdom. Unfortunately, I was very slow. You spoke about that we have to hear Bhagavatam in a certain way so that the lust goes out from the heart. If you can elaborate that.
Yes, it's in the verse. Of course, this comes up in the context of Shukadeva Goswami speaking about the Rasa Panchajaya, the 5 chapters about the Rasa Lila in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And Parikshit Maharaj is asking the questions, but he's noticing in the audience, and as is Shukadeva, that there's different types of people there. There's some Gyanis, there's some Karmis even, there's some people, and when the topic comes up about the Rasa Lila, he's thinking, I think these people will misunderstand what you're speaking here. So he starts asking questions like, isn't that immoral that Krishna is dancing with other people's wives? And then, of course, Shukadev goes back and gives the foundational philosophical information so they can understand. He said, just like a child playing with its shadow. It's his own energy. It's already his. So actually, the illicit affairs is everybody else. There's only one licit affair, that's Krishna with all his consorts. Everything else, actually, illicit. Although regulated, dharma virog bhuteshu. And Krishna says, then that's good, because you're doing it according to dharma. But still, the ultimate is that. So, in the verse, Vikriditam Vrajavadur Birahamcha Vishnu Shadhanvito Nushinuyat means, Shadhanvito means you have to hear it, Shraddha, with the proper faith. As we've heard many times, if you listen to Rasa Lila, which many people do, they jump to it. And they don't have the proper foundational understanding. They think, oh, I'm just like Krishna, he's a boy, Radharani's a girl, and so forth. They think it's ordinary, they mistake it, and therefore they become more absorbed in the lusty affairs of the material world because they don't have the preliminary understanding which allows them to enter in, which is called Shraddhanvito. Nashrinuyat. If you hear with the proper faith, case in point, Krishna book. Someone may say, Prabhupada mentions, don't jump haphazardly from one canto to the next and go into the 10th canto. Doesn't he say that? Say yes. He says it. And then you have 1970 and Prabhupada comes out with the 10th canto and says, distribute millions of these to the world. It's like, wait a minute. You said, don't tell anybody. And now we're going to tell everybody. Well, how's that possible? Because in the Krishna book, Prabhupada gives Shraddhanvito and Ashrinuyat, the perfect context for hearing about the pastimes of Krishna in the spiritual world. There's no paragraph that isn't given context in the Krishna book to understand that you're not your body. And Krishna's the supreme fire, and we're just tiny sparks. And we'll be overcome by the material nature, Daivahi Eshu Gunamayi, if we're inattentive and we try to control the material world, whereas Krishna, as the supreme controller, is never overcome. That's Shraddha, proper context for hearing about Krishna and his consorts. With that, then you make great progress. Without that, then you're doomed. And you become more attached to the material world. Okay? No 100 rupees for you. Okay. Anybody else want to try? Yes. 12 o'clock, all the way at the back. Straight back, pass the mic, 7 seconds or less, or your money back from this class. Keep going.
Hare Krishna. So you told that one of the obstacle in Krishna consciousness is attachment, too much material attachment. So when someone is having too much material attachment, the taste in Krishna consciousness decrease. And when the taste is decreased, the attachment become more. That becomes a vicious cycle, which is difficult to break. So what can be done, and how can one increase the taste and decrease the taste in material attachments?
Yena tena pakarena mana Krishna deveshayat. Somehow or other, you have to think of Krishna. This is the solution to all problems. As Krishna himself in the Bhagavad-gita says, man mana papamad bhakto. So we find ourselves in an awkward situation in the material world, because even though we may be aware of the fact that by engaging the senses with their objects in the material world, and we're really internally finished with the whole idea of the material world, we may still be attached to it and not be able to give it up. This is mentioned by Krishna in the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam when he says, Jata Shrada Makkatasu Nirvina Sarvakarmasu Veda Dukatmakam Kamams Prityage Pyanishvara Tato Bhajeta Jida Shradharlor Judinishchaya Jushamanams Tatam Kamams Duko Darkams Tagariyan. He says there is a period in Krishna consciousness, an interim period that's a little bit troubling. And that is, he says, you have this idea, well, first of all, your faith in Krishna Katha is awakened. Jata Shraddha Matkatasu means, Krishna's saying, your faith in hearing has awakened. Nirvina Sarvakarmasu, and you also know that sense gratification leads to trouble. Veda Dukatmakam Kamams, but Parityage Pyanishvara means that you still don't have the power to stop engaging in sense gratification. Sound familiar? You don't have to raise your hand. So, what Krishna says, he says, Tato Vajeta Mamprita Shradalur Jadinishchaya. You should keep faith in the process of devotional service and know that you're very dear to me for continuing. You can have a little bit of remorse for your ineptitude, but you should continue on the process of devotional service. So what to do depends on one's individual situation, and therefore Prabhupada was an example of one who followed the principle of Yena Tena Prakarena Mana Krishna Nivesha. It means somehow or other help people to remember Krishna first. That's the first thing. After all, many of the first initiates in New York City, Prabhupada said, you're getting initiated. They got initiated and they came back to their ashram and they found a note on the door telling them the regulative principles. Oh, by the way, there's no illicit sex, no intoxication, no gambling, and no meat eating, by the way. But he had already started them in remembering Krishna. So if one finds oneself in a situation where one's losing altitude in Krishna consciousness, somehow or other we have to find a way to stay close to Krishna. Preachers do it all the time. Of course, we have the famous Narada Muni who told he told Valmiki, who said, I can't chant anymore. Right? He said, chant Hare Krishna. I can't chant. So he said, just chant death. That's pretty tricky, right? Because he chanted Mara, 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 and he was chanting Rama. This goes to the idea of find some way or another to remain connected. And continue thinking of Krishna. There are varieties of ways in which we can engage in Krishna consciousness and somehow or other remain connected. Because just by being in the association of devotees, if you're not offensive, I'll just, this may be practical and helpful. In his teachings, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's teachings to Sanatana Goswami in Madhya Lila, around 22, you find that he enumerates the 64 processes of devotional service, correct? 64 limbs of devotional service, right? Say yes. So, out of those, he says, there are 5 that are so powerful that even if you don't have faith in them, and you only have a little contact with them, sualpam, little contact, he said they're so powerful that even in your state of being not so interested, but still you remain contact, he said you'll achieve love for God by these 5. Let's name them. Chanting the holy name, living in the holy dham, Vaishnav Seva, living in the association of serving devotees, worshiping the deity, and hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. There's your 5. In fact, I come from Silicon Valley, and we started a temple there around 1998. And you could see it's a busy place, lots of people working, and how when they lived so far away, all grihastas, would they make advancement in devotional service? And we came up with this idea, let's emphasize these 5. Because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, even if people have a little contact with these 5, or any of these 5, even if they don't have faith in them, they'll make advancement in devotional service. So we set up programs so that everyone could have some contact with one of these 5, even if it was a little bit. And I'm happy to report that it seems to be working. So somehow or other, stay in contact with one of these 5, and you'll be okay. And don't be offensive. That's the main thing. If you avoid offenses towards devotees and you go on with the practice, then you'll be successful, without a doubt. Prabhu. Thank you for the question. It was a very good question. No 100 rupees for you.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji. So I was just reading the conversation between Narada Muni and Vyasa. There Narada Muni says to Vasudev that generally people they have a tendency to enjoy. So that by describing all these things in Mahabharata, other Vedic literatures, you have misdirected general people to enjoy. Generally people, they don't like to take prohibitions, rules and regulations. They want to, because they have this tendency to enjoy, they take this. So when we speak to general public about such pastimes like Usha and Aniruddha, they like to take in their own way. So how this brings that Krishna Prema, progressive step towards Krishna consciousness?
Yes, that's a similar question, and my answer is similar. We have to build context for people, so when they hear it, they can understand what the tattva or our philosophy is. We don't indiscriminately teach pastimes. For instance, let's say you go to a corporate program and you know that the audience there is generally unacquainted with, let's say it's in a Western country, let's say it's in Silicon Valley, and you're invited to go speak at Salesforce. And then the people who come there have no orientation towards the Srimad Bhagavatam, or the Bhagavad-gita. They've just heard a little bit about yoga and self-realization from a smattering of sources. Okay? So then you go in and you start telling about Usha and Aniruddha, right? Say no. No. Wrong. You start with something simple, like you're not your body. And it's always a wonderment to me. I go to some of these places. Before the pandemic, I would regularly go to the office of Salesforce. We have a program called, what's that called? Conscious Living Network or something like that, where we come in and give classes to all the people. They take classes there. They invite people from outside. So there's a huge building. You have to check in at the ground floor and register and get a badge to go through security to go in the building. High tech, right? You're all used to that. So then when I'd go, many of the times I'd bring my little miniature changing bodies exhibit. It's one of the original ones. It's about this big. And I just carry it in, and people walking by would suddenly stop and do a U-turn and come back, and they say, wait a minute, what is that? I said, what do you think it is? And they go, oh my God. And I get on the elevator, like 7 people on there, and everyone would crowd around. They go, what is it? I said, what do you think it is? And they say, oh my God. And what we take for granted, because we've seen it a million times, and we've heard Dehino Sminyata Dehe, of course we shouldn't take it for granted. We should hear it again and again as Prabhupada presents it again and again and think, oh my God. But for most people, the very entry-level things that we take for granted are so interesting to them. But if you bring up Usha and Aniruddha, it's jumping to calculus before you've done simple mathematics. And people go, what is this? This is not mathematics. Where's the 1 + 1 = 2? What are all those symbols and things like that? So we have to order things and present them in a way that people can assimilate them at the level that they're at. And this is one of the great arts of preaching.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhu. So I think the bell rang. Ask not for whom the bell tolls. Yes. So first of all, I'd like to mention to you an innovative, groundbreaking, amazing new way to distribute Srila Prabhupada's books to the masses. This is called Transcend. And this program is an app. Everyone knows what apps are nowadays. They have too many of them. And when they don't have this, they don't have enough of them. Because this is the one app that will solve all their problems, Transcend. There's thousands of hours of audio of the Bhagavatam, the Bhagavad-gita, Prabhupada's books, lectures. You can read the books. You can have them right on your phone. And when people are able to take this app and include it in their pile of apps, this will become the main app that will liberate them. They'll be able to transcend the material world. So I highly recommend this, not only for your own phone. I'm not getting a cut, by the way. At least not as far as I know. And this is a brilliant program. I highly recommend it. And as far as distribution goes, there's so many benefits to distributing an app, because once the person gets on the app, then they live with you in the same building practically, electronically. You know what their habits are. They are able to stay in touch with you on a regular basis. So this is the cutting edge way to introduce people to Krishna consciousness and all of Prabhupada's literatures. This will sweep the nation here, then the world. Please take one of these pamphlets and get Transcend, and make sure that everyone you meet gets it as well. Bhima, how did I do? Thank you. All right. I have a few more things to sell, I think. Let's see. Sunday at Juhu Srimad Bhagavatam class. Is this for me? Am I supposed to read this? Oh, it's for my own personal content. Okay. Do you have bands? By the way, It's a good idea to distribute books, preaching to the choir. Hearing the scores read every morning here is like hearing Vishnu Sahasranam Stotram. Thousands of devotees going out to distribute books. The world, at least every sadhu in the world, is proud of the work that you're doing here because it's the pinnacle of devotional service, to show compassion to all living beings and to do what you're all doing. Organizing a beautiful center where people can come and take cessation devotees, and relentlessly going out into the world, in the marketplaces, door to door, in the corporate settings, Juhu Beach, and distributing the transcendental literatures in the tens of thousands a day. This is exemplary. You're doing the right thing, and continue to expand as much as possible and encourage other people to do so also. I know you intended to do that anyway, but I just wanted to tell you how I felt about what you're doing here. Thank you for what you're doing, and all glories to your service. I have some bands that you can wear. It says, Live to Give. It's the marathon that comes every time this end of the year. Living to Give means the international global Bhagavad-gita marathon. And I guarantee if you wear one of these, they were offered to Gornitai, then you'll distribute at least 5 times more books per day than you usually do. And so I recommend you wear one, and if it doesn't work for you, you bring it back, we'll give you another one. And if that doesn't work, we'll give you your money back for this band. Dear Srila Prabhupada, dear Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, class
free?
is over, right?
Is it free or it has some charges?
Why? Would you like to give a donation? Donations are accepted. Yes, they're free. Compliments of the BBT. We're ready to move on, right?
There are some announcements.
Tell what to do.
There are some announcements. Huh?
What? Anything else you want me to say? Let's say a prayer for Narottam Priya Prabhu's dear mother, who passed away 14 days ago, right? And such a glorious son she has, dedicated his life to Krishna consciousness. May she attain the lotus feet of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the spiritual world. Om Tat Sat. Hare Krishna. I thank everyone for coming today to the Bhagavatam class. Thank you for your association, and I look forward to more of it. Gaur Premanande. Haribo. Vanchakalpataruscha kripasinnabe vacha patitanam bhavanibhyo vaishnavibhyo namo namaha nantakodi vaishnavindi ki jai.
Better, yeah? Please be seated. So,
Yes.
indeed, it's our great fortune and our very great fortune and mercy of Srila